Chris, they say that when the United States sneezes, we catch cold, but are things different this time? Can Australia's strong economy and trade with China, Japan and India provide some immunity from the effects of a US recession?
Our links with Asia and just the ongoing strength of the Australian economy will provide some immunity, but it's limited immunity. If the US is clearly already in recession, people still denying that, I think, are just wrong. In the past, of course, that's generally been very bad news for us, but they had a recession in 2001 and we didn't. So we can survive a US recession, but if the US tanks, that is, if the US recession is a severe one, then there is no question Australian growth will be affected. This idea that the world can decouple from weakness in the US is simply wrong.
Chris, why has the Australian share market suffered such heavy falls when the mortgage meltdown is primarily a US problem?
Yeah, it seems unfair, doesn't it, that we've been punished as much, if not more, than the US share market for what is, what began as a US problem. But the fact is that share markets around the world are correlated, and there's a sound reason for that. A share in the US and a share in Australia are substitutable goods, if you like. So when the fundamental price of one comes down, the fundamental price of the other one comes down. It makes some sense that we reflect what happens in the US, but we also know that it's in part because the US market is taken as a signalling device, and we will suffer when the US suffers for a long, long time to come yet, even if the problems are not as bad here.
Throughout the current credit turmoil, Australian banks have been able to access wholesale funding and continue to issue credit, albeit at a higher price. What could happen to inhibit their access to funds, and what would be the effect?
Well, hopefully we've already seen the worst of that restricted access to funds. Banks, of course, do part of their funding in world credit markets, and the short-term cost of funds has been driven up by the subprime and other issues. But we may well be at or past the worst point there. So as we go forward, my suspicion is access to credit will in fact get better. And of course, access to credit is a problem for the banks, but it's more of a problem for the non-bank lenders, for the wholesale lenders to housing, for example.
Chris, then, are you optimistic that Australia, with its small population but strong economy, will come through the current turmoil without too many scars?
Well, the Australian economy has done remarkably well. We haven't had a recession coming up for 17 years now. I don't think that the current world economic and financial turmoil is going to drag us into that recession. So I think we'll continue to do well, but it would not surprise me if, in part because of what's happening in the rest of the world, and also in part because of the monetary tightening already in place, it would not surprise me if we go through a period of slow and perhaps even surprisingly slow growth. And for the first time in quite a few years, we're likely to see the unemployment rate rising.
They're probably already thinking about this, but what lessons can financial institutions learn from the way credit has been managed in the wake of the US subprime debacle?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what the permanent lessons of this episode are. I think they will include a better pricing of risk, more transparency, less use of fancy structured products that at the end of the day nobody fully understands what's in them anymore. So I think there will be long-term ramifications, hopefully greater transparency, possibly a bit more regulation. I think it's hard to see exactly the complete fallout from this episode.
Finally, Chris, what do you hope to come out of discussion at the Liquidity Crisis Summit on the 22nd and 23rd of July in Sydney?
I suppose a greater understanding of what's already happened, why it's happened, what its effects are, and what its effects are likely to be.
Chris Caton, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the conference.
Thank you. I look forward to being there.